The United Arab Emirates is technically an Asian country, but here's the strange part. Almost 90% of the people living there aren't from the UAE. Entire neighborhoods speak different languages. The economy runs on global migration. For example, Dubai's skyline looks like a futuristic version of Manhattan. The population is mostly foreign. The economy runs on global finance and luxury tourism. And in some districts, you're more likely to hear English than Arabic. So how did a small country in the Arabian desert become one of the most globalized places on Earth? And why does it feel so different from the rest of Asia? The answer lies in geography, history, oil, and a strategy that quietly transformed the country into something unique on the world map. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. If you enjoy videos that break down the hidden logic of the world map, geopolitics, borders, and global development, consider subscribing. There's a lot more beneath the surface of our planet. Geographically, the United Arab Emirates is located in Western Asia. It shares borders with Saudi Arabia and Oman, and it faces Iran across the Persian Gulf. On paper, it's firmly part of the Middle East. But geography alone doesn't explain identity. To understand why the UAE feels so different, you have to go back just a few decades. Until the 1960s, the region looked completely different. Take Dubai. This city should not exist. In the 1950s, Dubai was little more than desert, small villages, and pearl divers. Today, it has the tallest skyscraper on Earth, artificial islands visible from space, and millions of international residents. So how did one of the harshest environments on the planet turn into a global metropolis? In the 1960s, living in the UAE was harsh. Fresh water was scarce, infrastructure barely existed, and economically the region was relatively poor compared to many parts of Asia. Then, everything changed. In the mid-20th century, oil was discovered beneath the desert. Suddenly, one of the harshest environments on Earth sat on top of one of the most valuable resources in modern history. Oil revenues transformed the region almost overnight. Roads appeared where sand dunes once dominated. Cities began to grow. Ports expanded. Airports connected the desert to the rest of the world. In 1971, several of these emirates united to form the United Arab Emirates. And from that moment on, the country began pursuing a strategy that few other nations in Asia attempted. It decided not just to develop, but to globalize at extreme speed. Most Asian countries built their economies around manufacturing or agriculture. Think of China's factories, Vietnam's export industries, or India's technology sector. The UAE took a completely different route. Instead of relying on a large local workforce, which it simply didn't have, it opened its doors to the world. And the result is one of the most unusual demographic structures on the planet. Today, roughly 90% of the UAE's population is foreign-born. That means the vast majority of people living in the country are expatriates. Engineers from Europe, construction workers from South Asia, entrepreneurs from the Middle East, financial professionals from across the globe. Entire neighborhoods in Dubai or Abu Dhabi function almost like international hubs rather than traditional cities. And that alone makes the UAE feel fundamentally different from most of Asia. But the demographic story is only the beginning, because the country's leaders understood something early on. Oil wealth doesn't last forever. So instead of relying solely on petroleum, the UAE invested heavily in diversification. Dubai became a global logistics hub. Abu Dhabi built sovereign wealth funds worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Free trade zones attracted multinational companies. Massive airports connected east and west. Within a few decades, the UAE positioned itself as a bridge between continents. Not quite Asia, not quite Europe, and not quite Africa either, but somehow connected to all three. On the world map, Dubai sits in the middle of the Arabian desert, a place with extreme heat, almost no natural water, and very little farmland. And yet somehow, one of the most futuristic cities on Earth was built here in just a few decades. Yet this transformation raises an important question. If the UAE is geographically Asian, why does it feel culturally and economically so detached from the rest of the continent? Part of the answer lies in how the country designed its cities. Many Asian megacities grew organically over centuries. Places like Bangkok, Delhi, or Jakarta evolved layer by layer. History, colonial influence, rapid population growth. Dubai, on the other hand, was largely planned. Entire districts appeared in just a few years. Artificial islands reshaped the coastline. Luxury developments targeted international investors rather than local populations. The result is a cityscape that feels more like a global showcase than a traditional Asian metropolis. But there's another, deeper reason, and it has to do with geopolitics. The UAE sits at one of the most strategic locations on the world map. The Persian Gulf is one of the most important energy corridors on Earth. A huge percentage of global oil exports pass through nearby shipping lanes, especially the Strait of Hormuz. That means the region is deeply connected to global power politics, and the UAE leveraged this position carefully. Rather than aligning itself too closely with any single regional bloc, it cultivated relationships with multiple global powers, strong ties with the United States, growing economic cooperation with China, trade connections with Europe, and regional influence across the Middle East and Africa. This multi-directional diplomacy reinforced the country's global orientation. The UAE wasn't trying to be just another Asian economy. It was trying to become a global crossroads, and in many ways, it succeeded. But this model also creates tension, because behind the glittering skylines lies a system that raises difficult questions. The country's rapid growth depends heavily on migrant labor. Millions of workers, particularly from South Asia, build and maintain the infrastructure that powers the UAE's economy. Construction projects, service industries, logistics networks. Much of the visible prosperity rests on this global workforce. Critics argue that labor conditions and worker rights have not always kept pace with the country's economic ambitions. Supporters point out that the UAE has introduced reforms in recent years and continues to evolve. Either way, the system reflects the country's unusual position. It's an Asian nation built on a global labor structure, and that's extremely rare. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Because the reason the UAE feels different from the rest of Asia isn't just culture, architecture, or demographics, it's something deeper. The UAE was built with the future in mind. Many countries develop gradually over centuries. The UAE essentially compressed that process into a single generation. In just 50 years, it went from scattered desert settlements to one of the most connected economies in the world. High-speed infrastructure, massive aviation hubs, global finance, tourism, technology, and renewable energy investments, even ambitious projects in space exploration. All of this was part of a deliberate attempt to move beyond oil and redefine the country's place in the global system. So when people say the UAE doesn't feel like Asia, they're noticing something real. The country deliberately positioned itself outside traditional regional patterns. Not fully Western, not fully Middle Eastern, and not fully Asian in the economic sense either. Instead, it built a hybrid identity, a place where global capital, migration, trade routes, and geopolitics intersect in the middle of the desert. And that's what makes the UAE so fascinating on the world map. Geographically, it's in Asia. Historically, it's rooted in the Arabian Peninsula, but economically and culturally, it functions more like a global hub than a typical nation-state. In other words, the UAE didn't just adapt to globalization, it was designed for it. And that might explain why stepping into cities like Dubai or Abu Dhabi feels less like entering Asia, and more like stepping into a preview of how some parts of the world might look in the future. If you're fascinated by the hidden forces shaping countries, borders, and global power, there are many more stories like this. Because sometimes the most interesting places on the map are the ones that don't quite fit anywhere.